Hi there, Earth Nation. This is Amanda with the Activated Earth Summit 2023, all about nature connection and what that connection can do for you. And I am here today with Ian Banyard, and I'm going to read his bio for you. Ian Banyard is a well-being author, a nature connection guide and guide trainer, as well as a creator of the online platform and community Nature Connection World. In 2014, Ian went for a long walk in nature and discovered what he calls natural mindfulness, the restorative power of cultivating nature awareness. For nearly 10 years, Ian has been sharing his process of finding his way back to nature from a fast-paced and high-stress lifestyle. Ian has a passion for creating more nature consciousness in the world by helping others discover, heal, understand, and release their own true nature. Ian guides people back to nature through his words, guided walks, courses, events, and retreats. Ian lives in the UK, the Cotswolds, an area of outstanding natural beauty, and can be found easily via his Linktree profile, which we will be sharing when this goes out in an email. And at the end of our conversation today, you get to speak it out for those people who like to take notes. So there are those people who enjoy that. And for those who just want to listen and relax, it will be in the body of the email with this talk. So I would love to just start with the connection that you developed as you were growing up. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and thank you for inviting me to speak and share
Thank
my experiences, my connections, my understandings, my insights. When I was a child, I was instinctively drawn to nature, like I think we all are. My parents weren't very good at stopping me. I think that might be where I got my start, because they were always losing me. At a very young age, the stories I hear is about I'd wandered off and was found asleep in a field close to the house, where I just wandered off and just gone exploring. Same at the beach. If we went on holidays, I would just wander off sometimes. And I think I was quite a dreamy, distracted, and maybe slightly disconnected child that just wandered off and just liked being in my own space. So I think I had that in my nature to be a seeker, I think, somebody who was curious about the world and wanted to understand it a little bit better and find my place in it. But like a lot of people, as I sort of grew up, went to school, went to college, got a job, got a family, got all those responsibilities,
Yeah.
I lost sight of it. It was something I put away. It's like a lot of my toys as a child were put into boxes, put up into the loft, and remained there gathering dust. I think I did that with what I call my true nature. And I think my true nature was to be working with nature, in nature, aligned with my own nature. And I somehow, like a lot of people, was channeled down a route that was very against my nature. And as a result, really, it took me till I was in my 40s to sort of hit that wall. I always say I climbed a corporate ladder, realized it was leaning against the wrong wall, and so I jumped off and found myself in nature. And I literally did that. I did I tripped myself up. I think I kind of unconsciously crashed to a degree, and found myself alone. Living in a very beautiful part of the UK, up in the English Lake District, which if anybody's ever travelled there, it's a beautiful place, lots of lakes, very small mountains and small lakes, but it's a beautiful place to just immerse yourself and lose yourself. And I had an instinct then to, again, get lost. I think just run away, escape from all of the challenges and the troubles, and a kind of burnout, I think. And so I was just in nature every day. I'd wake up and I was in a beautiful space. Wasn't always recognizing it as that then, but I was there 5 years. And over those 5 years, I had a couple of dogs as well that I would take out with me. And dogs are wonderful for sort of grounding you and
Yeah.
kind of getting you back into your sort of senses. I had to be very aware of what they were doing and where they were, and I just used to like to let them off and let them go free, and just follow them. And it 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 reconnected me. It reconnected me to this strong connection to nature I had as a child, and this idea of exploring. I think the only difference as an adult is I recognized that my tendency to want to explore nature is actually an outward projection of my need to go in and explore the nature within me. But I see nature around me, and I'm attracted to that. And I actually think that what we see in nature is a projection of what is within us. So with that, with where I sort of keep that in mind now, is the awe and the beauty and the wonder that I see in the natural world is merely a mirror reflecting the awe and the beauty and the wonderment of the nature that's within all of us. But first, I think we have to sort of see it out there before we can explore it within. So I've always had that. I've always had that connection to
Yeah.
nature from a child, lost it along the way, and then came back to it through life challenges and crisis, which isn't the best way to do it. I have to say to people, please, if you can avoid that, it's much better. And that's part of what I'm doing now, growing nature conscious communities, is guiding people to a closer connection with the natural world, because what we connect to, we care about, and what we care about, we protect and we nurture. And there's never been a more important time than now, I think, to start caring more deeply about and connecting with the
Agreed.
natural
Yeah.
world, because we are nature, and in what we do with nature and to nature, we're ultimately doing to ourselves. I'm pretty sure the planet will be carrying on without us.
Yep.
I don't think we need to save the planet. I think in some ways the planet needs to save us, and maybe this renewed interest in connecting more deeply with nature that I felt quite a few years ago, and other people are now kind of waking up to. It's what I call nature consciousness. I sense that perhaps this is the planet trying to save us, and we have to listen and connect. And so I've always had it, I've lost it, and then I've got it back, and I believe everybody else has it too. So that's the message I want to give to people: is there's a seed of nature consciousness in every one of us, but like seeds that you plant in your garden, or wild seeds, they don't all come up at the same time. Sometimes they don't all germinate. It takes a zinc spark to germinate a seed. And you'll know a lot about that, Amanda, in terms of
Yes, I have had a lot of seeds that did not sprout. I love one of your stories of your own self-discovery, and it's a tree experience. And I personally, trees are one of my favorite things on the planet, because they show us how to be in so many ways. And I feel like energetically, human beings are more like trees than any other living thing on this planet. We share a common goal of connection with the above and below, and they teach us about living in community. They teach us about helping each other, and with the way they collaborate with each other. And you had a really amazing experience and message from a tree, and I would love to have everybody hear that message so they can understand just how wonderful trees are.
Yes, you're referring to the period of time when I was
Yeah.
on my hermitage in isolation, living in the Lake District, feeling very sorry for myself, and sort of thinking a lot about me, actually, and how life had mistreated me. And I was walking through a forest, and I've always been drawn to, throughout my life, I've always been drawn to these uprooted trees. When these huge trees go over, and there's all those roots that have suddenly become exposed, that are normally beneath the surface. I'm always drawn to that. I remember it manifested firstly about, I used to think, well, if there's ever going to be anything that hasn't been found by an archaeologist or somebody yet, it will be underneath one of these huge trees, because that's the only place you can't get to while the tree is living. As soon as the tree comes up, it's almost offering this gift of, well, whatever's been buried beneath this tree over the hundreds and hundreds of years that tree stood could very well now be there. So I've always been sort of been curious to see what's in the roots, and dig around in the roots and underneath the tree to sort of see what was there. But on this occasion, I'd noticed the roots of the tree, and I'd noticed the roots of the tree were quite, they weren't very strong. It was one of these trees that wasn't connected to all the other. It was a big pine tree, which wasn't natural to that space. But so unlike beech trees, that under the surface all sort of connect and hold on to each other and sort of feed each other, as you were just referring to. This one had gone over. Not only had it gone over and crashed itself, but it had gone over and it had crashed and crushed some smaller trees as well. And I remember looking at that and thinking, I'd gone from feeling very sorry for myself, and I sort of saw myself a bit like that tree. People would have thought I was very strong and in charge of my life and doing well in life, but actually, beneath the surface there was weakness there. There was a weakness in I'd gone against some of my values. I always say the roots of a tree are like values and the connections we make to people. So when we feel isolated from other people, we can lose sight of what our value is, and we can we're no longer feeling supported and held up. So it's easy to be knocked over, often by the smallest of storms, not even a huge storm. It's tiny things can knock us over when we're not strongly connected and we're feeling isolated. But I'd also noticed this tree had gone over and it had crushed some of the younger saplings beneath it as well, and it sort of brought me to think about the consequences of my fall in life, and my failure. What I saw as my failure in life, how that had affected the people that I was closest to and the people that were closest to me, my family, my friends, my children. And it was this really strong message that did bring me to tears, actually. And I've told this story to other people when we've been on walks, and I tell this story to sort of connect them to so that they can look at nature and pick up their own life lessons. Because I think, again, I was talking about nature projecting back at us. When we look at nature in that way and observe nature and sense nature in that way, as human beings, probably where we have evolved slightly differently to trees, we get insight and we put meaning on things. Sometimes that meaning is the meaning can be quite daft and can be quite sort of self-absorbed. But how I tell the difference when I get life lessons from nature, meaning from nature, is there is no self-absorption in it. There is no, it's almost like it's the message is not something it's not how I would usually format a message like that. It's something, it comes to me, an insight is probably the best way to say it, or an outsight coming from the outside, but triggering something on the inside. And there's lessons in there. And what it does is it triggers a very primal part of me, which is what I call my inner hunter. And my inner hunter is the instinctive part of me that is really good at finding my way. It's really good at helping me find my true path. And so when that stimulates, what I do is I look for trying to find something from loss. So I was taught growing up that the opposite of lose is win. And I learned that the opposite was win, and then tried to win back everything I lost. And most things I could try and win back in some ways. There was lots of things in life. If you lose money, you can win it back. If you lose a relationship, you can win back a better one. There's all these sorts of things you can do. But when I went through bereavement around about that same time, and both my parents passed, and I felt the loss of being separated from my children, hence that this tree connected for me. The insight I got was another opposite of lose is win. Is win, but is also find. And how? So you can always find something from loss, And it was looking at this tree and seeing how this tree, had lost its life, I guess. And I now I don't see trees as dying. I see trees as transforming. They go from something that grows upwards and grows towards the light, grows downwards, grows down into that, and it's there, and it's very strong at the base, but it's very fluid at the top and very flexible at the top. But then they transform, because when they fall, they take on a new life.
Yeah.
They're no longer growing for themselves towards the light, and they're becoming a home, a security for everything else that lives in the forest. As they almost go from a state of growth to another life of decaying, and
Yeah.
of gradually breaking down. And it was astonishing. And hearing you say that you feel we're closest to trees, in some ways it makes, it sort of brings up in me this idea of, even after we've gone, we're no longer growing as a physical body. What we share and what we connect with in our life, our legacy maybe, will live on and will become something, a foundation for new life to grow from. And the great thing about fallen trees is I know this, and many people probably know this, is that, because the tree falls, it opens up light in the canopy that
Yeah.
for hundreds of years has actually been blotted out by the huge tree. But once the tree falls, it not only becomes a home and food and something for the soil and all of the creatures that live that way, but it opens up all that light. So all of the small saplings that were living
Mhm.
around it, struggling to survive, suddenly get this huge burst of growth that comes from it. And
Yeah.
that fallen tree that you talk about, I mean, the amount of metaphors and life lessons that have come from that story, and not just from me telling the story that I wrote in the book, because that book was published in 2018, and that happened to me in 2002 originally. But the years after that, retelling that story, and then people like yourself asking me questions about that story, what I call sharing our nature connection, sharing our nature consciousness with each other, the sharing of it brings even more richness from it. And it's almost like, the story in itself is a story of something falling, but coming from that story is all these other offshoots and new growth and new inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you covered all of those topics, because that is exactly what happens with a tree. Because as a scientist, I'm professionally, I'm a scientist, but my most of the time my world is the combination of science and spirituality, which to me is the science is the observation, and the spirituality is the connection.
Mm.
So that's my simple definition of it. And the tree just is a really great representative of ways that human beings could be living
Yeah.
and we're not. And you had mentioned that, well, some of us are. You had mentioned that this experience was where your natural mindfulness sprang from. Am I remembering that correctly?
It looking back, I can see that I didn't call it natural mindfulness then. I didn't call it in my childhood. I didn't call it natural
Mm.
mindfulness, but I was very much aware that it was. I have dreamy state. I tune out. I think due to my childhood, I was one of these kids that would tune out, because it was sometimes there were things going on that I couldn't escape from, and I couldn't run off into nature and hide from, and I had to just be in those moments. And I think what children can do is they can just tune it out. And I used to listen to music. I would put a radio under my pillow and things, so I would just listen to music. I still hear music now. I wake up in the morning with songs going around in my head that I just know that it's a reminder that I'm tuning out. There's something I'm tuning out from. It's my survival mechanism to do that. But I recognize that when I tuned out, I actually tuned in as well. So it's not so, I think Gabor Mate talks about in traumatized children, that this is a tuning out that maybe what is creating the huge growth in attention deficit disorders and attention fatigue. So I recognized I tuned out, but I think I also tuned in. And I think that was the gift of being able to tune out and tune in, because you talk as a scientist about observation. By tuning out, you can really observe the world, because you're not feeling the pressure of it. You're not feeling the emotions from it. You are almost tuned out. So it didn't touch me. I could just be in situations and observe it and see what was happening without the emotions overwhelming me. But then you can tune back in. And when you tune back in, you go from being the observer to being the experiencer. And from experiencing comes connection. And of course, so this idea of connecting and disconnecting is it's a wonderful part of what I call the natural mindfulness experience. Because for me, natural mindfulness is that recognizing that I am part of nature, but I can also be apart from it. And that brings very negative possibilities and also very positive possibilities. By disconnecting from nature, we can observe it, we can learn about it, and then we can reconnect with it and help it and create harmony and work with it in that way. But also by disconnecting, we can harm it, because if we just disconnect and we don't know how to reconnect. So for me, natural mindfulness was this state of very relaxed, but also quite alert. So it's a relaxed alertness. Athletes call it being in the zone. It's that, I think, and in the book The Nature Fix by Florence, and last name's escaped me, but maybe we can pop it in.
We'll look it up and put it in the email.
Yeah, or it might come back to me. But she wrote a book called The Nature Fix, and she talks in there about the alpha state of the brain and how, when we go into that particular state, it is like a flow state. And I recognize that's what natural mindfulness was. I came to I needed to name it. I needed to have a word or a combination of words that I could put together in order for me to help share it and communicate about it. And I'm one for, if I can't find a word that does something, I put words together or I create words. I talk about anxious excitement with my daughter because she's going off this morning on a trip for school, and I said I bet you're really excited today, but I bet you're really anxious as well. You've got anxious excitement, and it's a lovely phrase, because it means that your anxiety will stop you getting overly excited and do something silly, and then your excitement will stop you from getting over anxious and not doing anything at all. And natural and mindfulness were these two words I felt I could put together that really encompassed what I was trying to share with people, that it was a state of being that once you embody mind, body, spirit, emotions, everything, once you embody that, you are a part of nature. It's like everything, all the manufactured, manipulated parts of ourselves, personality wise, ego wise, fall away, and we recognize that there is no distance or difference or disconnect between us and nature. We're not actually disconnected from nature. We can't be. We are nature. Yeah. It's just the mind has told us we're disconnected from nature. So it's the tuning out. We just need to adjust our frequency, and we're back there.
I love what you said about tuning out actually helped you tune in. And when you talk about it, the experience of being in nature, what it sounds to me like, it's almost as if you go out into nature, nature's going to gift you with a facilitated meditation. So it's like having somebody lead you through a visualization, like nature is actually doing that for you. Is that what does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. And resonates the right word, because I see it's like a tuning fork. It's like a tuning fork, and if you strike a tuning fork and hold it next to the tuning fork next to it, that starts to vibrate at the same frequency. And I think that's what we're like as human beings. I often get people into a big circle when we go into a forest, and I basically look at the person on the opposite side of the circle, and I say, I'm more in harmony with the people on this side of the circle than with you, because you're on the opposite side of the circle. So there's a discord here. So if I came up to that person and tried to get into harmony with that person, it's not for real. I'm just using it as a model. I'm just saying, where you're standing there, we're in Discord, I'll put my right hand up and say, put your right hand up. They'll put their right hand up and I say, well, look, see, we're not the same. We're very different. But if the person here, if they put their right hand up, and the person here, if they put their right hand up, we're all the same. So we're in harmony. I said, but the point is, if I vibrate with the people next to me and they vibrate with the people next to them and they vibrate with the people next to them, all the way around, eventually the vibration I'm sending out and the vibration you're sending out will harmonize through this connection. And actually, I think that's what's going on I think that's what's happening with nature from a science point of view. I think we'll find that that's how nature works. It's hard, there's vibration. This is how the fungal pathways and the tree pathways have all working together under the surface is through it's vibration. It's not sight, it's not sound.
Yeah.
Well, sound in that case, but it's this sort of feeling of that. And to me, if I go out and I'm guiding people and I'm not in that state of natural mindfulness, and this is what I do with my guide training, I'll say to the guides, the most important thing about this is that you embody this practice of natural mindfulness yourself, so you can recognize when you're connected to it and when you're not so connected with it, because it's when we're not connected with it that we have conflicts and things don't work out and things don't flow and grow. So to me, it is something that's there to tune into. And at the moment, I'm saying to people, well, there are guides that can help you tune into that, but actually no guide guided me to tune into it. And this is the one thing I say to people is that you don't need a guide. I could go on holiday to a beautiful place in the world. I don't need to buy a guide to go with me, but actually if I want to go and see if I've got a short time span, I want to see the best places and avoid some of the worst places, it makes sense to get a guide. And so then I can, it can make that much more enjoyable and easier. But those guides need to really resonate with what it is, where they're guiding somebody to. They have to know the path in order to guide someone along the path.
Yeah. And I know I have a question building around that, but there's one from a little bit ago that I want to ask first. So the tree experience that you had was sort of this mind-blowing epiphany. And lots of times when you go out, like if you were going to explain to somebody how to know that nature is mirroring something to them, even in a small way, what are the small experiences? How would you let somebody know that they were actually having that experience if they're not recognizing it because it's too it's not like an explosion of a huge shift in your awareness. It's just a day-to-day kind of thing.
The first thing really is about experiencing. I always say the first step is to experience, and I think there's been a reduction, a dilution of our ability to really experience things, because so much of the information that comes to us now is filtered to us. It's not through our senses, it's through somebody's told us, or we've learned from we get information not from first-hand information now, but second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand. And I think many people now are they're using their sense of sight and they're using their sense of hearing, but not necessarily. It's not as developed as it could be. It's like I remember I used to wear contact lenses when I was younger, and I wore them for years, and I used to wear them for 30 days and then change them. And by the end of the month, when I would take them out and put new ones in, I go, oh wow, how clear is everything? It's wonderful. And how did I not notice how dull my contact lenses were getting? And I think that's a bit like life is for people. Our actual senses have become dumbed down and dull. And so for me, the first thing when we go out is it's getting people to start practicing using the senses. I start with breathing. I always start with breathing, because, you know, having a sense of breath, we don't even think about breath. When you then connect our breathing to nature, trees are a great example, because, you know, the trees feed us the oxygen, and we give back to the trees what the trees need, the carbon that comes from our breath, the trees take in. And so there's a wonderful synergy there. So I teach people and share with people just a very easy breathing exercise, practice, experience, whatever you'd like to call it. And that shifts something. When people start to focus on their breathing, it shifts something in them. And especially when they put meaning on it. And especially when I start asking questions about, you know, how is it we don't notice our breathing? How is it we put more attention on food, which we can go weeks without, and on water and fluids and drink, which we can go, you know, days without. And yet we put very little conscious attention on breathing, which we can only go minutes without. And it's starting to sort of shift people into that trance, kind of maybe more focused in the present moment, mindful, meditative state. And once they're starting to shift into that more meditative state, they're getting closer to what I call natural mindfulness. Then when you start to bring the senses in, and I talk then about extended senses. So there's the 5 traditional senses that we all taught at school. But I say, what about your sense of balance? What about your sense of direction? What about your sense of humor? And then I go, and then there's the other 3. I said, who hears sensitive, who hears sensible, who hears sensational? You know, anything that moves you, moves us in the world, is a sense. You know, people say, oh, I have a sense that somebody's watching me. I said, well, which of your senses is that? And you go, well, it's kind of like a feeling. It's kind of like I can see that they're seeing me. And so we're so restricted by just this idea of there's 5 senses. And to me, you know, everything is a sense, because in a sense, we are, you know, we're kind of energetically connecting with what we perceive to be an unlimited, infinite world out there that we just tap into a small bandwidth of. And, you know, I sort of talk about instinct linked to, and I talk about intuition, which is on an extended bandwidth, because what we tend to focus on is thoughts and feelings, which are on a very narrow bandwidth. You know, those are like the colors we see with our eyes. It's that's thoughts and feelings. But there's intuition that's sort of out towards the infrared, and there's, you know, there's an instinct which is sort of ultraviolet, or the other way around. You know, it doesn't really matter. But opening people up to that there's possibly more to sense than they're sensing is exactly the state of being that opens up the attraction to what I call natural mindfulness, because it's, as I say, it's like flow. And I can say to people, you know, do you ever feel like everything's just flowing and you're in the flow? And people go, oh yeah, I love it. But then it just goes and I don't know how to get it back. And I say, well, you know, if rather than calling it flow, you call it natural mindfulness, and you have a practice that you can start using, and nature can help you by going out into nature and becoming more curious than afraid. Because another thing about the you know, us as human beings is we are naturally curious. We're a naturally curious species. You've only got to see what we've done and where we've gone and where we try to go. We're just a very curious species by nature. But by frightening everybody, what we've done is we've suppressed curiosity. I always say to people, can you be curious and frightened at the same time? And well, I could ask you, man, you know, is it possible to be curious and frightened at the same time? My experience is that if I'm frightened, I'm not curious. Everything shuts down, and I get overwhelmed, and I'm not curious. I just don't want to have a conversation about things. I just want to close down and get out of that space. But if I'm curious, it's impossible to be frightened of something I'm curious in. So curiosity, getting people to be curious, opening up their senses, focusing on things they don't usually focus on. You know, starting to see and discover things that they didn't even know were there. That's what's wonderful about nature, is that there's so much there, and we don't always see, hear, feel. We're not always in connected to it. And once you start finding things in nature, particularly if you go on a bug hunt, or if you go looking for particular, listening for your favorite bird, or there's loads of apps now you can use. I say to people, take apps and listen to bird song rather than listen to it as bird song. Start to see if you can pick out individual birds, and an app will help you identify what the bird is, and go try find the bird. And once you get into that, going looking for what you can actually experience there, then you slowly start to move towards connection. And then that connection that comes from experiencing is you're then reaching out, and that's when you can touch a tree and you can feel the life force in the tree. I get people to put their hand on a tree and then maybe take their hand off, and I say, can you still feel the echo of that tree on your hand after you've moved your hand away? And it's like, yeah. And I say, well, how far can you move that hand away from the tree and still feel the echo of what it felt like when you touched it? And it's amazing. It's amazing how people who've never, they've always maybe poo-pooed something like Reiki, or, gone, oh, I'm not into energy healing and all this. Once they kind of get this idea of an echo, a feel of an echo on them, they suddenly become much more open to, oh, maybe there are things. I think really what I'm doing with people is finding ways, natural ways, to start to remove barriers, remove the things that are stopping people, because I believe we can all connect to the life force in nature. There's an aliveness in us and there's an aliveness in nature. And I'm looking for ways to help people tune in to that aliveness in themselves, and then that aliveness in nature. If you can tune into the aliveness in you and recognize that you are a natural being with aliveness in you, when you go near other natural beings in nature, you can sense that. And you sense that by just learning to tune yourself. Notice the aliveness in you, and you'll start to pick up the aliveness in everything around you. And the easiest way to do that is with a pet, is with your dog, your cat, your bird, whatever it is you might have. And we feel the aliveness in our pets, and then somehow we think that the aliveness in farm animals, or the aliveness in plants and trees isn't there. We disconnect from that aliveness. We protect and we nurture our pets. We need to protect and nurture nature, but we'll only do it if we connect to it and we start caring about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what you said about not being able to be curious if you're frightened, there is a lot of fear-based messaging out there right now. And a lot of people that I talk to, at least, are really getting tired of hearing those things, and realize that we don't have to be afraid of so many things that we're being told that we need to be afraid of. I'm wondering if you feel like actually creating this connection with nature would naturally reduce the fear that's running rampant through humanity right now.
Well, I have an example of that, and that is that when in 2020, when people were I noticed people were starting to get very frightened, and I have a big community of people involved in nature connection, people are interested in nature connection, and I had a really big group on Facebook, thousands and thousands of people who were asking, I could find out from them what was going on. I don't watch the television, I don't watch the news, I avoid all of that, really. I'm not that interested. And I suddenly realized, what was starting to happen. And I really wasn't frightened. I'm in my 60s. My kids were phoning me up saying, "You need to protect yourself, Dad. You're old now. You need to stay away." And I was like, "I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." I grew up in the 60s. I've only ever caught flu once in my life, and I had bugs and things as a kid, but I've always felt I had a very strong immune system, and I was fine. And I wasn't frightened. My wife and I, we weren't frightened, but we met so many people that were really, really frightened. And actually, what was interesting is the nature connection network I had were asking questions and were challenging things. And that doesn't come from people that are frightened. And it was really interesting because I noticed there were particular groups. There were groups that were anti-authoritarianism, which they'll always reject. It's in their DNA that they'll reject. Somebody says go right, they'll go left just because they've got that rebellious gene. I have an element of that within me, but there's much more. There's much more to me than just a rebellious gene. I'll conform when I can see the sense in that and I can understand that. And it's in my best interest and the people I care about's best interest. I'll absolutely do that. But I noticed that people that were closer to their nature were much more curious about what was happening and were asking questions that a lot of other people weren't asking. And it was quite interesting to see that. And certainly, looking for other alternative ways of staying healthy, maybe better vitamins, better diet, more sleep, all of fresh air, lots of that really going on. But I noticed a big difference. They weren't anti-authoritarian. They weren't people that were very rebellious. Some of them were probably more conformist than rebellious, but were just curious. And to me, when I see curiosity and I see people questioning and asking, if it comes from kindness, if it comes from wanting to learn, then to me, that tells me that there's no fear there. And one of the things I noticed, certainly here in the UK, I don't know if it was the same in your experience, but my experience here was that the fear ramped up, the fear around getting everybody to conform to what was happening, and it seemed to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up and get more and more and more and more. Till there did come a time when I did start to get quite fearful myself, and not for myself particularly, but for the people I care about and the people that are there. So I think there is something about becoming truer to our nature. In other words, aligning more with the natural world does start to make things that are unnatural or artificial or superficial much more noticeable. And when I've often said to people that one of the benefits I've found from being truer to my nature is I don't wear any masks. I don't need to put any front on or pretend anything. I'm just very honest. And if I upset people, I apologize for that. But I'm just saying, well, that's me being me, and that's how I am. And if it's because I've said something you don't agree with, then you have to know that I really think that's true. It's not that I want to hurt you. I just want to say that's my truth, and I can't not speak my truth.
Right.
And I think this is, to me, that's a good thing. But if we suppress that, then it never grows. It never matures. It can never then be used. And I always say temper is a really good example of that, because temper is really useful if you use it. But if you lose it, you can create all sorts of problems for yourself.
Yeah.
But temper is a part of our nature. It's a very primitive part of our nature, but some people have been able to nurture it and connect strongly with it and identify with their temper, and then they use it. And it's not called temper, it's called passion.
Yeah, I love that. What a great way to put it a different spin on it. I have a temper.
We all have. We just don't often admit it.
I let it drive me. It's it actually gets me to get moving on something.
It's fuel, isn't it? It's fuel.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Because the temper, like the anger, doesn't really belong to anybody around me. It's all about what have I been doing? Have I not been authentic? So it helps us shift.
It helps us shift track. I think it's Charles Eisenstein says that healthy anger is it's what you need to get off of if you're on the wrong track and you're on the wrong track, you actually need healthy anger to get you off, because you're not going to get off by being gentle with yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. I feel affirmed. So you do teach. I don't know if teaching is really what you would call it, helping people to see, opening people up. You have some programs, and so that you can share what you've received from nature, so that you can share it with people. Let's just talk about that for a few minutes.
I call it guiding. I've been a coach in my life. I've been a therapist of sorts in my life. I've been a teacher in my life. I've been a leader in my corporate life and all of these things. And none of those words would felt natural for it, but the word guide did. And guide is a very, very old word, and it's it comes from the same source as the word wisdom, because it was vide. It was pronounced vide, not guide. Originally G's come into it, but it was the W or the V sound that was with it. So wisdom and vision and guide, it's all from a similar root, and it's one who knows the path. And I've always, I think what helped me with moving into running courses, helping to empower, I see it as I'm helping to empower people and enable people by guiding them. And what I do is I guide them along my path, the path I've taken, until such time as they're ready to set off along their own path. And so I started off with walks. I thought walks were the simplest way to do it. So I used to do well-being walks. I still do well-being walks. I don't charge for them anymore. I run a pay it forward. So the people on the walk get the free walk because somebody before has already paid for it. And then they have the option to donate and pay for the next walk. So I think that's very much more natural, that we're giving to someone in the future. We're sort of, I think that's how nature works. It doesn't sort of take from the present moment. It's kind of always going forward. So I set up walks first of all, and I just was showing people how I connect with nature to tune them into natural mindfulness in that way. So it's sort of finding the path to your true nature. And then on the very first walk I ran, actually, I had two people on the walk said, can you teach me to guide walks? So immediately I had then two routes. So from guiding walks, I had guiding walks and then helping others. And I recognized that on a natural mindfulness walk, I only take about 6 people at a time, because more than that, you're damaging nature. You're getting benefit for yourself, but more than 6, and you go walking through lovely spaces and just your feet are going to damage. So I keep it small. And then as a result of that, then it meant that if I train more guides up, we can reach more people. And I got this realization then that this wasn't just about taking people into nature. This was actually a much bigger thing. It was about, as I now call, building nature conscious communities, so that the idea was, if I can do this, I can show somebody else how to do this. And if then we are doing this, we can create a nature connected world. We can the more people I show how to do this, then they can go out and show people, and it ripples out. It's like pollination. It goes out. It's how nature works. Nature casts seeds out, and those seeds throw away. So I go, well, my idea is that the walks are a seed of an idea. If I plant seeds of an idea in people on the walks, they may then go on to then plant seeds of ideas into other people. So I very much saw it that way. In 2017, I started doing guide training here. So I'd run a guide training course. It was a 2-day course where we would be inside for a little bit, but mainly outside, just me showing people what I did and how to do it. And then I noticed people were starting to come to where I am from further afield. And I had people flying in to do a 2-day course with me. And I thought, this is, I was very uncomfortable with how much it was costing them to do that. And somebody said to me, can you do this online? And I just thought, it doesn't work online. I don't know how to run this online. I went for a walk, and within a month of having the thought, an insight came to me about how I could run it online. And I do a 21-day guide training course. So I guide, other guides can come through over a 21-day period. But I say this is just a part of a journey, and there's a longer journey. And I have another course I call The Journey, which is me sharing my inner guides. I have 4 inner guides that I've created, connected with, that help me move closer to my true nature. And one of them is, one of those guides is very instinctive and is about finding. It's about it's about how do you survive physically, and that's really about using your instincts to experience life, experience things. Then there's the emotional part, surviving emotionally, and then there's a healing element of that in my journey. Then there's the mental part, surviving mentally. So there's a using my thoughts to understand. So that's another part of my journey. And then there's the spiritual survival, which for me is very much about tapping into your intuition, which is what I call insight and outsight. So I use the journey as a way of kind of taking people along that journey that I did about finding healing, understanding, and then releasing my true nature. And so my courses can be very simple as a walk. They can be guide training, and also the courses I run, which go a little bit deeper. And I have people like therapists and coaches that want to come on the journey. The journey never ends, so it's an ongoing course. I run it online, and I tried to do it for 4 weeks. I tried to do it for 8 weeks. I tried to do it for half a year, and in the end, I just went, this is just an ongoing journey. People can just stay here as long as you want, and then leave when you want, and come back when you want. And so I have a few guys with me that we're trialing it at the moment to see how it runs, and if we can just keep this thing rolling, where people can just drop in and find, heal, understand, and release their true nature. So the idea is from that course, you can, whatever it is you want to do with nature connection, you can align it with your true nature, heal and get rid of some of the barriers that have stopped you doing that, understand yourself better so that you can better then release who you are back into the world. So those are the courses I love doing. They're
I can tell.
Self-discovery. They're self-discovery courses. I call it a self-discovery course, but I guide on it. I don't teach anybody anything. It's not about them learning. We've had enough learning in our lifetime. We have innate abilities within us that lie dormant, and they're the seeds. I have a 600-year-old beech tree. I think it's 600 years because it's been pollarded, which means it was cut and cut and cut and cut, but it continued to grow, and it's massive, this tree. It's very close to where I live, and it's 600 years old. And my little girl one day picked up the beech kernel and one of the little seeds that had come out of it. And she said, "Daddy, I can't believe that this big tree, 600-year-old tree, came from this little seed."
Right.
And I said, "You're right, darling. Everything that tree needed to become this 600-year-old beech tree was in that seed." And she said, "Well, if that tree can grow from that little seed, why do I have to go to school?"
What a good
And I
question.
just thought, out of the mouths of children comes such a
Yep.
truth. We're the only species on the planet that has to go to school and learn how to be useful in life.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were allowed to just follow our innate paths that are within us, the nature that's within us, and we were just allowed and given the freedom to find our way aligned with nature, what sort of world would that? I would love to see what that world would be. I don't think I'll
Me
ever
too.
see. I don't think I'll ever see it, but I'm doing my damnedest to
Well, I
get
think
people to
you're living
recognize
it.
there's another way.
You are living it in your own personal
Yeah,
world.
and that's all we can all do, isn't
Yeah.
it? That's all we can all do, is just
Yeah.
be the best we can be. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned all of the aspects of where we can be broken, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What kinds of healings have you seen on any of those levels? Maybe just a quick example.
Yeah. Physically, I've seen people. I've had people come on walks with me that when they've started on the walks, they've been slow. It's been painful. They've been bent over, but through a little bit of a physical exercise, I guess, but also by this learning to be more mindful and using mindfulness to move away from pain, because quite often we focus a lot on pain. So what I find is the walks in themselves, the well-being walks in themselves, treat a lot of the symptoms of the disease that people are suffering from, and they also help with some of the treatments that people have. So some of the treatments we have for conditions and illness that we have in themselves can affect us, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes mentally, certainly spiritually, because the people I meet that go, I wish I could just have faith that I could heal myself, and that I'm part of nature and it's a bigger thing. But what I find is that in that moment, when people are in the present moment, they're connecting through their senses. Any feelings of physical discomfort leave them, and they're taller, they're more balanced, they're connected. They come and tell me, these walks are great because, when I come on these walks, I forget about a lot of the issues. And because they're gentle walks, they're not, they're not hikes or anything. So you're not forcing your body. And that shifts into things like emotional pain as well. A lot of people's emotional pain disappears when they become curious, because most of our emotional pain is based on fear. It's based on things from the past that we can do nothing about, and things in the future that may not even happen. But if we're pulling those in emotionally, we get upset. And then the body, I always say the body is reacting to something it can't sense because it's in the mind. So it's the body's looking for the danger that the mind is creating, but can't touch it, see it, smell it. All it's doing is it's feeling what's coming from the mind, which is an illusion. So it's pain caused from illusion. Mental unwellness. I see people say I can think more clearly. I always say that when we go into nature, two things happen. One is we plug in to an energy source, and the second one is we download from some sort of collective consciousness, natural, I call nature consciousness, in the same way as our phones do. I basically say, if you want to be smart in life, like a smartphone, a smartphone's not very smart if you don't charge it. And a smartphone's not very smart if you don't tap into the internet. So we are the same, but we don't plug into the electric, we plug into life force. So if we go out into and surround ourselves by life force, then that will boost our energy. I've had some wonderful things happen in nature where just as I've said something, or just as when somebody said something in nature happens that aligns beautifully with what they've just said. And to me, that's when somebody has then shifted completely into accepting that there's something bigger going on than we realize. I've got an exercise called Coming Alive Inside I touched on when I was talking about touching the tree and getting the echo in the tree. And quite often I'll say, and I have a video, that I made for my guide training, where I was basically saying that when you're deeply connected to the aliveness in nature, you're no longer seen as an intruder, you're seen as being part of nature. And that's when you notice that wildlife comes closer. And at the moment I said that, right in front of me where I was shooting, so I was shooting myself on the camera with behind me. And so in the camera screen, I could see a deer walk past in the background, just as I said it. Now that doesn't happen usually. They're not tame where I was walking. They hide away from us. And I had my dog with me. And so what was interestingly is my little dog was sat there just listening to me talking as I do on my phone to people, recording a video. And she was just very relaxed. The deer was just very relaxed. I was just watched it. As soon as I drew my attention to it and said, oh, look, there's a deer, which proved what I was saying about how nature comes closer. The dog saw it, the deer reacted, and everything just shot off. So in that moment, I disconnected from being in that deep state of natural mindfulness and connecting with the aliveness. And I suddenly became an intruder because I'd disconnected. So, and that I've caught that a number of times on films where animals have come closer, birds come right up to you. And those are the little miracles I love on these walks when, a bird cries out just at the moment somebody was talking about something, and then the bird cries out and everybody laughs because they go, oh, did you, was that prearranged? How did you prearrange that? And I say, well, the thing with nature is if you're in tune with nature, this is what's wonderful about creating natural mindfulness experiences in nature, is I don't plan for them. I prepare for them. Because to plan means I'm going to try and control it. I'm going to try and make things happen. Whereas if I prepare for it, what that means is I've got rid of anything I don't need, and I've made sure I've got the things I will potentially need. And then I can just go into it very purely, without any attachment, without any intention, and just go through that process. And it's amazing how nature just seems to deliver. In the moment. I always say I often find myself in the right place at the right time nowadays. I never used to. I always used to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the wrong time in the right place thing. But now I find myself in the right place at the right time because I'm the right me. And I think if you're the right you, you're always in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And then, whether you're in nature or whether you're at work or whether you're at play, whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
If you're the right you, then the magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, I could listen to you talk for several more hours.
Oh,
I have really enjoyed this conversation so much.
oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, there are like so many more questions that are coming up for me. And I'm sure that everybody who's listening has them as well. So if they would like to get in touch with you, how
Mm.
would they do that?
Well, there's a number of ways. I have a community. I tend to invite people to come and join my community, because that way we can interact with each other. I don't do mailing lists and things like that anymore because people find them annoying. So my link to my website, and then the link on my website that takes people to the community, is if they just put in natureconnection.world. So natureconnection.world will take people there. I'm on Instagram as Natural Mind UK. So that's that. If you put that into Instagram, you'll find me. And I have a link tree. I love Linktree because it's got tree in it. It was green. It was a green logo, and it was called Linktree. And I went, I have to have that. And it's great because it connects all of the things I'm doing. I can connect in one place. And my Linktree link is natural mindfulness. So if you go to Linktree and put in natural mindfulness, you'll find all my links in there.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for
thank you,
sharing
Amanda.
with me and everybody else today. This has it's been wonderful. I feel a huge amount of resonance and agreement with all of the things that you have said. So it's been just very inspirational for me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for making it possible. And thank you for helping me share nature consciousness and nature connection further afield. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we sign out for now, but not forever.
Oh, bless you.